A far distant wind. Angela was not naive, and she certainly wasn't a Pollyanna. She'd never been one. She'd witnessed that trait all too often in too many other folks, so she just worked hard instead at discovering the best combination of reasonable and acceptable. Her Achilles heel, however, was knowing too well that life rarely lived up to its advanced billing. It had become second nature for her to negotiate for different with the world and those in it. If she were never to be ecstatically happy, she reasoned, she was at least going to be mostly content, able to accept the adequate with the more often awful disappointing. Still, she always welcomed and enjoyed any rare appearance of better. She knew perfection was lacking in life, but she kept looking for it, always hoping it would appear as a wonderful, if unexpected, surprising gift. This morning offered a unique exception to her cardinal rule of balance and compromise. The day was really promising, unusual, and she saw the actual possibility of a rare and elusive moment appearing straight ahead. She decided to take the local train into the city instead of the usual express that was always jammed with commuters like herself, usually standing stuffed back to front, door to door, trying to read their morning Times. As was her habit, she detoured to pick up a supersized Starbucks mocha cappuccino on the way. The line for the coffee was quick and short for once, and the Starbucks was extra hot and creamy, soothing, actually. She wanted to sip the coffee leisurely and have a bit of breathing space away from starting her work and managing others, but she also knew she was running late this particular morning. She'd missed the express, so she had to opt for the local, annoying, because she hated crowded trains. Then, surprise, surprise, the local appeared and it wasn't packed. She actually found a seat by a window. The morning was glorious, and happily she didn't feel the usual frustration of having to sit and wait through all the stops the local made on its way into the city. She was calm today. She sipped her coffee slowly, relishing the frothed milk on her upper lip and the steamy, strong roasted flavor that slipped past her taste buds. She noticed this new fall day was going to be sunny and beautiful, blue and clear, not hot at all. Definite possibilities were in store. She sat back and relaxed, deciding not to reach for the report tucked in her briefcase that she had to review before a 10 o'clock conference call. Working 50 hours a week and commuting was a major challenge, especially when you were trying to keep a marriage going and help your parents, now living only a town away, into retirement living, and all at the same time. It wasn't a crapshoot, that she knew, but it wasn't as difficult to keep up the chase as she had expected either. Life was definitely smoothing out better than usual. The usual wrinkles were disappearing a bit. She liked where her job was taking her. She had just been made project manager, and the new apartment she and her husband Darren had taken on the outskirts of the city was shaping up to be a real home. Even helping her parents hadn't been as intruding as she expected. It was actually nice having them nearby for a change. Perhaps things were going a bit too well? That was a worry she often had. She paused and considered what could go wrong, and then shook off the thought and turned to enjoy the passing sights that were whisking past her train window. There was still that other perfect possibility to resolve, of course. She'd know for certain when she got to work, and she had a bit of quiet time to get the answer in private. She thought about that possibility now as she sat sipping her coffee and watching the stations come and go. The commuter train first slowing and stopping, then lingering for late boarders, then the shadowy images rushing past as the train picked up full speed again. The people on the platforms seemed to merge and become a jumble of human clumps, all waiting for their own trains to somewhere else that was hopefully important. They flashed by as blurs, moving from slow motion to a rapid rush of unrecognizable waiting faces. She was probably like each of them, she mused, always looking for the easy normal. The local did have its own bizarre charm, though, she decided. She'd never noticed that charm before today. The rapidly warming sun streamed in through the train window. She sensed its flashing beams breaking up and flashing here and there, especially during the quick bursts of speed the local took whenever it left the shade of a station platform and headed down the tracks to the next stop. The sun felt optimistic and bright on her face, indeed rather calming and settling. She swayed to the rhythms of the rails and closed her eyes to absorb the early morning coolness not quite gone yet. She felt the flashing patterns of light and dark on her eyelids, the constant change in moving sensations. The car lilted to and fro, and she heard the voices around her, all talking work and life. Lots of words, but thankfully none with any meaning for her. She didn't have to connect or understand them. At the office, when people talked, she had to concentrate, pay close attention. She should have brought her sunglasses, though. She suddenly realized she'd need them at lunch. It was going to be a very bright fall day. She'd been rushing that morning, rushed in taking the drugstore pharmacy test, rushed in keeping it a secret so Darren wouldn't guess what was going on and then grill her about it at breakfast. He always got too excited, too optimistic when she brought those things home. She certainly didn't want to disappoint him again. She smiled. She didn't want to disappoint herself again either. That's why she was going to retake the dumb test at work, very precisely this time, and alone and quietly. It was ironic how a little strip dangled into a cup of urine could potentially be so important, so life-changing. She giggled at the thought and then was jostled by her seatmate. What was left of her coffee splashed onto her skirt and into her open briefcase. "Damn," she muttered, "I must have dozed off. That was stupid." She would miss her stop if she didn't stay awake. It was probably the sun. All that warmth, all that coziness in the train car had made her sleepy. Or was her sleepiness the first tangible sign of what she really wanted? A pregnancy? "Sorry," her seatmate mumbled. He was an executive type, just like she was, and he handed her a folded, clean handkerchief. She scrubbed at the stain on her skirt and mopped at her briefcase, making sure the contract she'd brought home the night before was still pristine. She'd need to drop off her suit at the cleaners this evening, or the stain would surely set. She politely told the gentleman not to worry. It had all been her fault, after all. She had slumped and leaned too far right in her own share of the broad seat. At the main downtown station, she got off the train. She noticed the traffic on the platform was scattered now, quieter and not so rushed. She guessed most of the really rabid early commuters had already come and gone. There wasn't as much of a push-shove mentality that she was used to struggling with on the express train. That was another good omen. Maybe she would take the local more often. Try it again. Normally, she hated her commute. There were too many people rushing to get nowhere too fast. She made her way easily outside to the street. Her day had started really well, she thought. She still had a bit of time, so she decided to walk the few blocks to her office, not take a bus. She strolled, not hurrying. It was an extraordinary day, warm yet brisk, actually peaceful. The people she passed seemed to agree and be similarly attuned to her own expansive mood. They were taking the same few extra minutes she was enjoying to feel the morning, that small moment of living that was open to everyone before people had to settle into their day of work. She looked up at the cavern of buildings rising on either side of the street and listened to the taxi horns and street sounds echoing around her. There was a strange contentment in the chatter of a city, the traffic, the noise, the clicking of shoes on pavement, the barking of a couple of dogs, and the calls of cart vendors doing early business, all street music singing out on a busy weekday morning. The sky was piercingly clear, an occurrence that rarely happened in the smog and pollution of this metropolis. There were no clouds at all, just that intense blue. A block away, her building shone tall in the sun, a matching twin, its windows glistening like a beacon against the same robin's egg deep blue sky. Remarkable. She'd take a short walk at lunch if the weather held, not eat at her desk and study as she did most days. Her new position was pushing her to work a lot harder than she wanted to. Her luck held one more time. She caught the first available express elevator and zipped up to her office on one of the highest floors. At her desk, she noticed the clock. It was 8:20 already, but she still had enough time to take the test, carefully, of course, before her first morning conference call that was scheduled for shortly after 9. She took the EPT package out of her bag and headed to the restroom. She stood at the counter over the sink. The little cup of urine was in one hand, and the narrow marking strip she held in the other. "Well, this is it," she said out loud to nobody. "Here goes nothing." She plunged the strip deeply into the urine, took it out, shook it slightly, and watched, perhaps a bit too expectantly. She'd surely been wrong earlier. She'd probably done the test too fast, kept the strip in too long, or maybe the test had been old, outdated. A strange reading again was not what she needed. Today was a moment for absolute accuracy, nothing left to chance. No doubt whatsoever was the only clear solution to assuage the massive question on her mind. It was a hope, but also a fear. But then again, what if it was true? What if she really was pregnant? Everything would surely change, at work, at home, with Darren, her folks. She and Darren wanted this to happen, but could she handle one more change in her life? Could she handle perfection? The time ticked off on her watch, the second hand whirling a bit too fast. She looked at the reading on the strip. She sat at her desk, oddly stunned by what had just happened. What she had suspected indeed had been confirmed. Why me? Then she rephrased the thought. Then why not me? Women get pregnant every day. It would be a good thing, a great thing, even the kind of change that could be completely life-changing. She smiled, a bit of a gleam in her eye, a satisfied glint in her smile. She looked at the clock. It was past time to get her day started, but she had to call Darren first, tell him. Angie, that's good news, great news. I'm happy, I'm really happy. She could hear the pride in his voice, the thrill he got from hearing her say they were going to have a baby. Finally, of course, she'd have to get medical confirmation, but still it was a wonderful private moment for the both of them. So am I, babe, but it is such a change, isn't it? Can we handle it? Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk more tonight. I love you. I love you too. Take care, okay? You've got to watch everything now. I will. I think I'll take a walk at lunch. It's a gorgeous day here. So it is. Here too. Enjoy. Say bye. That was their favorite sign-off, their private and unique communication to each other whenever they talked on the phone. She hesitated. She wanted to hear it one more time. Say bye, babe. Bye. The line went dead. Angela put the phone down and sat quietly and reflected on what had just happened. Her morning had been a bit overwhelming. Maybe she'd found that final elusive something she'd always been looking for, but hadn't expected to ever find. Sometimes life actually did fit right, with one event amazingly leading to another and then another, intertwining the way it was supposed to, the way it should. She wondered what the rest of her day would bring. Meetings, no doubt, and plenty of project work, then lunch and a walk in that wonderful, warm, bright sun. She'd definitely eat lunch outside today, maybe by the historic church nearby. She'd sit on the bench under the broad old tree where there was always shade. After all, she was pregnant now, and a bit of peaceful coolness would be welcome. She'd have to tell everyone, of course, but when? Where? At her 10:30 team meeting? To her manager over donuts? She smiled. Today was a day to have a cream donut. The sweeter and gooier the better. Definitely. She was going to celebrate. Later she could be really disciplined about eating and the food. The clock on her desk buzzed and blinked. The power had spiked in the building again. She reached over and reset it. 9:15 it was now. She glanced at her watch to check the exact time. The sound came from the distance, outside like rolling thunder. She glanced toward the window. Was a storm coming? Unlikely on such a clear day. What was that sound then? It was too loud, like the high wind in a hurricane. She'd heard the sound once before as a child in Florida, and she still remembered the horror that followed during that awful storm. She walked to her window and looked out across the skyline that stretched far out over her city. She liked the view from that window. On a clear day like this one was, she always could see for miles, nearly forever, mentally embracing the city so far below. Suddenly, a huge image of a plane filled the cloudless sky outside. She could even see the cockpit nose. It was huge and very close, much too close. The roar of its engines was deafening to her ears, and the vibrations shook the building. What's a plane doing here? She spoke the words aloud, puzzled, and then more than a little confused, her mind trying to take in the immensity of such an idea, but not able to do so in the immediate moment. A plane as large as that belonged higher up in the clear robin's egg blue sky, heading toward an airport, Kennedy or Newark or LaGuardia. In the instant before the plane came through the window, she realized she'd been duped. It hadn't been a perfect day after all, and she'd not have another chance for one. Not ever. It should have been a wonderful day that day. It should have been her most special day, and Darren's too. But instead, it became a day marked by death. There had been an urgency, a huge one, and the name given to memorialize it was ironically the same simple phone number she had been taught as a child to dial if something bad or scary happened. All of us were just living life that day, and life was happening moment by moment. We were all trying to find our own private perfections or attempt to plan them, or so we thought. But then destruction arrived. It was those individuals in that plane, she now knew, whose sense of perfection had become sadly misguided, and yes, too distant and too different from her own. Their days must not have been like hers ever, and sadly now they never could be. They would never find better. Her life had been mostly happy, positive, and forward-looking. Their lives had instead morphed somehow into a far distant wind that finally rose up and consumed them in an angry, misguided purpose that simply came and blew her and them and everyone else on that plane away. She'd always been expecting, seeking, and hoping for perfection, and likely so had they, at least at one time. But they never found it. She now realized that in her own sudden tragic moment, that all presumptions about life are only tentative, and at their best sometimes even wonderful, but often also naive. They are dreams, placed there by nature and history and futures that every person is always endlessly searching to find. It was the human condition to be hopeful, she believed. Always expect and look for the good even in the worst of times. She knew she was now forever separated from that life and its ongoing journey, yet she still wished that all people everywhere could actually find better, new ways to live their own simple, chosen perfections, and happily so. That realization was as deafening as the last terrible sound she'd heard that fateful day outside her office window. It was an idea, indeed a wish, that she'd hoped that all who were still trying to live their lives well and positively, as she had always tried to do, would someday learn to embrace together.